DDG episode 26. My name is Dave Hunt. As always, I'm joined by Michael Swick.
Fourth week in quarantine, fourth week. Dave, you've been my only counter of what day it is of the week, so you need to keep me up on this.
We're recording, but we're recording late, so it's just a day that ends in Y.
Okay, all right. So. That's the only way I can keep time anymore is when I record with you.
All right, and we have another guest this week, our second guest ever, a good friend of mine, Kahlief Adams from Spawn on.
What up?
What's going on?
What up, man? Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to finally get a chance to rock with you. I'm very, very proud of both of you for jumping into the big other side of the pool, getting the show together, and it's been dope to see you all growing and kicking ass. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. Even like we tried to message back and forth last week, and it will on top of the fact that he's on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast, that when we communicate with each other, it seems like when I'm ready to talk to him, he's not ready to talk to me. When he's ready to talk to me, I'm not ready to talk to him. So
we are ships in the night.
Yeah,
for sure.
But I met Kai. We were just talking about before we started recording. I met him 2014 or 2015, my first E3. And he doesn't know that I remember this, but this is just, he had a Seattle Supersonics t-shirt on. And that's part of the reason why I just talked to him briefly for a second. And then we found out that we were both kind of doing some similar things. And then him and I just kind of ended up hanging out a little bit then. And a friendship just kind of grew out of that. We ran into each other at a couple other events. We've played some games together. We've done some things. And he has been a huge asset for Digital Days, helping with some feedback and some suggestions and being a sounding board for me and for us. Michael doesn't talk to him as much as I do, but he definitely was, Kahlief is a pillar or a brick of the foundation of what Digital Days is hopefully becoming. And so I am very always appreciative for you being there during the early stages of what we hope to be something of nearly almost as close as to what you have. So.
I mean, knowing the pedigree that you both have and the work that you've already done in the industry, like knowing that you were going to go and venture out on your own, like there was nothing but massive amounts of love to you two getting this thing off the ground and making it dope. So I'm super excited and happy to see how things are growing. And I'm already hearing and seeing just how many folks are like engaged with the show and checking it out and listening. And that stuff has just been fantastic to see, and any little bit of help that I could have given to that, like I'm super excited to have been a part of that.
All right, so let's tell our audience, or let's have you tell our audience who you are, what you do, and what your space is in the gaming world.
Yeah, so I run a podcast called Spawn on Me. We are the premier podcast spotlighting people of color in the gaming industry. We've been doing that show for about 6 years now. I've been in the gaming industry probably around 8 to 10 years with a blog, and then now the podcast, and then doing other content and hosting events and things like that. It's been an interesting ride to say the least. It's been super fun to kind of get to know folks like you and other folks in the industry over the years, to kind of build out what we're doing, to kind of showcase why representation is really important, and also why having a prism that is not like everybody else's is important to the conversations that we have in the gaming space too. So it's been fantastic to be able to do this work and to be able to rock with folks like y'all.
Awesome. So just we'll have you plug at the end too, but just where can they find you?
We're on all podcast platforms. Everyone that is out there that you can probably go find a podcast, we're on YouTube, Instagram, Twitch. We do a show as well on do our live recordings on Twitch around 7 p.m. Pacific time every Thursday. So yeah, definitely come through, check it out, follow the show on all that stuff, and subscribe and do all those cool things.
Very cool. Yeah, so he'll plug that stuff at the end, but Kai's been on our short list of people to get on the show, and we're still in that delicate balance of growing the show, getting our rhythm, and still broadening the experience to everybody else. And when I mentioned that you were on the short list before, there's a handful of people in our Discord and our Facebook group that know who you are, so they're very excited to definitely hear you, and we're excited to have you on. So again, we are Digital Days Gaming. You can find us similar to Spawn on Me on all the podcasting platforms. If we're not there, it's probably a reason that either they don't let us or Michael doesn't know how to do it.
Pandora.
And again, we live on Twitch, twitch.tv/Digital Days Gaming, where we are live now. And our show releases every Thursday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern time. So this week's show will be out then. And then obviously we have a Patreon as well. If you want to support that, that would be amazing. You can get multiple tiers to that, one of which is early access. And you can also find us on almost all social platforms, just searching Digital Days Gaming, Facebook group, Discord. The Twitter handle is Digital Days Pod. And if you're listening for the first time because Kai is here, if you could just share the show if you like it, if you like what you're hearing, subscription, any kind of feedback or review is always appreciated. But just sharing the show is the huge help. Just getting more eyes on the show is always the best way to grow. So any way that you guys could do to help us grow and introduce us to new people is always appreciated. So, all right, Michael, what you got for news?
All right, news, unsurprisingly, is going to be COVID related to start off. That has been the pattern for the last month or two. Gamescom has officially called it quits for this year. Germany extended their large gathering ban until August 31st. Gamescom takes place August 25th to 29th. They came out and said they aren't going to do Gamescom this year. And they aren't going to, I guess they could have pursued an exception, but they're not going to even do that, which is good, thank God. But yeah, Gamescom, which I guess was the next game show people were looking at after E3 was canceled. Like, well, Gamescom can go real big. They are going to do a digital only event in its place. They haven't confirmed the day or time yet for that. They're hoping in the same window Gamescom was originally scheduled, but Gamescom is no longer happening. Jeff Keighley is still going to do his one night only thing with Gamescom. It just now we don't know when that one night will be. And then in other sad cancellation news, San Diego Comic-Con was also canceled. But I just figured we'd talk about this. How do you guys feel about we're moving into this world where we're just not going to have trade shows for probably a while, and even then trade shows in 2021 are going to be very different than what we've seen in the past. How do you guys feel about this new future that seems to be inevitable now even more? Because Gamescom August sounded, like maybe things would be better by then, but that doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. Dave?
Go ahead, Kai. Go ahead. You go.
It's going to be team shoulder bumps and elbow daps for the next couple of years, I can tell, when it comes to any of these shows. I mean, of all the shows to get canceled this year, I think it makes even more sense that Gamescom and San Diego Comic-Con got shut down.
Because they're both like sardine cans.
Yeah, seriously. Talk about shows with lots of human beings just being around each other. Like two of those shows, especially Gamescom, is huge with the kind of numbers that they pull in every year to have people kind of in close proximity, touching each other and breathing on each other and all that kind of stuff. It makes me a little bit sad, of course, because the industry shows are still the lifeblood of getting good information out in lots of ways when it comes to gatherings and getting information out. The thing I am really interested to see is, we have a lot of conversations about, what normal is going to look like once COVID kind of dies down and goes away a little bit. I just don't know what shows and personal interaction is going to look like when it comes to any of these things in the future. Like Dave and some of the best meetings that you can have are those face-to-face ones where you solidify those relationships with people, and then you can grow your relationships when you're trying to get content together, or you're trying to, if you're press, you're trying to get people together to do stuff. It's just going to be a whole different landscape once we come out of this cloud. So it's going to be real difficult to see how and when people feel good enough to be able to go in those public spaces and do that kind of work again. So yeah, real weird times, man. Real weird times. Yeah,
it's definitely and I'm past the point of where I call something scary, because it's not. We know enough about. I mean, at least right now, we know enough about what your do's and don'ts are, and one of the don'ts is to not be in a space with a lot of people, even 10 people. That's just a don't right now. And if you feel like you're going to need to be in an area that you're not comfortable, they want you to wear a mask. And then if you can wear gloves, if you want to go wear gloves, but that's the whole productive conversation you can or can't have with yourself. But it's just one of those things where it's just the unknown, and then the travel and the, I mean, I automatically think about just a hotel that we go to, like, you know, like the Ritz at E3, like how many people have touched that elevator button, you know, like, so, you know, and I mean, you already hear about like con flus and stuff like that, just from, you just get the sniffles, or you get a little, just like you just feel like you've been beat down after just being exposed to so many different people and so many different germs at the same time, that your body's like, oh, this is like overload, and you get the con flu. I, you know, like all of us are, you know, in our 30s, and being, if we got it, like we probably would be okay, but it would be a matter of who else that we expose ourselves to. Like, and that's just the scary part. And yeah, like Gamescom looked like it was going to be on the horizon, but like all the data and is saying, you know, trying to reduce things, and even the new normal. Like, I want to go to a baseball game, I want to go to a movie theater, but it's not the right decision. So, and there's really no other way around it. I mean, like Gamescom, we've all of us have been at E3, and we've stood in those lines trying to just get into the show, and then it's Gamescom's is that times 10.
Just imagine that though, like all the things that we're used to as games journalists and press folks, right? Like you're used to being in long ass lines with lots of human beings around you at all times, and it feels like now more than ever everyone feels dangerous, right? Which is the part that is the most scary and weird part. Go ahead.
Could you imagine? I don't know if you saw this when they were showing Cyberpunk at E3 the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
They packed dozens and dozens and dozens of people in a tiny room, like it was shoulder to shoulder. I could not imagine doing that ever again.
Right?
Like at all. Like it's scary, and I get claustrophobic thinking about that, especially now. It's just insane. Like the ESA is like E3 2021 is going to happen, but I just don't see how it's going to happen. I'll probably want to go just to see what it is, but we're probably going to start seeing face masks more common in the US now. Gloves, and you know, like at least people will be using hand sanitizer more.
I mean, we hope. We hoped about that with deodorant. We saw that didn't work. God knows how many. but I think to a certain extent, like the most interesting part is going to wind up being not even necessarily how we or the rest of the game
reveals. So
I mean, well, the game reveals stuff, but also like the folks who are putting on these shows have to totally change the way that they think about administering shows now, and like how they're going to run these kinds of shows, because we see that there are people who are getting things done fairly well without needing physical presences at events. You know, I think about the smaller events that you get invites to, right? Where it's like, you know, I see Dave all the time at like Ubisoft events and stuff, and things that we get invited to. Like, do those change and go away in real ways? Like, does that stuff become, hey, let me just email you the trailer I was going to fly you down to go see, as opposed to us having the you know, the face-to-face big event kind of reveal thing, which I love. I love those things. Those things are like one of the coolest perks of being in this business. But do those things go away in real ways too? So like, there's a lot of questions out in the air, and I don't know if anybody's really gotten a good answer about like how people are going to kind of tackle that stuff. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and it was always about the developer or the publisher controlling the environment. Like you always wondered about like when they fly us out to play a Far Cry game, or we get to, you know, go behind closed doors and check this out. It's because they have full control of the environment. If they see something happen with, you know, while you're playing, like, hey, like, please, like, you got to let us know, like, don't talk about that, or that's an accident, like that shouldn't have happened. And the trust that you get with PR is built up enough to where I don't know if anybody has enough trust to be like, here, I'm gonna just send you this build of this game through Gmail or whatever, and let you play it, and then just don't talk about it for a month. Like, that has disaster written all over it.
Now with influencers.
You know, so it's like, it's nothing. I still feel like nothing will ever change a hands-on impression in the gaming industry, for whether it's a review or a preview or an interview. Like, that won't ever change, but the ways that may or may not be able to be done could be changing, or will be changing dramatically.
Yep. Anybody with a sniffle,
Yeah.
oh boy.
Well, I mean, I still look at when PSVR and Oculus were first rolling out, and it was like I'm not a huge germ freak, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to put that visor on after I just saw that sweaty guy playing Beat Saber or something, like, and they wipe it down and stuff like that. But I mean, like, are we gonna get to the point where we're gonna see like the controllers dipped in some fluid before? Like,
I mean, first of all, I'm right here. You don't have to talk about me and my sweaty ass in a PSVR headset, because that's true. That was me. And I was like, oh man, I feel so sorry, y'all. You're gonna wipe this thing down after my big ass has just been playing this thing. But you're right though, right? It's like people were thinking about germs in those ways, even in such a small infinitesimal scale. But now, because it's like actually dangerous, like that changes the way that all that stuff winds up working. Like, I don't even know how you do a VR demo in this now COVID, laden kind of world. I don't know. It's going to be real nuts to see like how people kind of deal with that stuff.
Yep. We end up might just seeing like the return of debug units to more media outlets, because that was like debugs were a thing early in the PS4, but it sounds like most outlets, they just like either return their debug or stop using their debug console. But that's probably going to be like what they're going to have to do for like the new generation of consoles, just because we're not going to get solo events anymore, or not the way we're used to it. It's like I went to the Black Ops 4 event, and I remember I flew over there to play the game for 60 minutes, and I sat in an auditorium with a couple hundred people, and there was food everywhere, just kind of like on tables that people were just picking at, playing the controllers, playing on the keyboard and stuff like that. And it's just like, it was fun to cover, but like looking back at it, it's just like, that's going to be not a thing that we do anymore. And it might end up working out for the companies, because that is a ton of money that they would do to rent like a hangar just so they can put on a demo for 60 minutes so they can, have 1,000 people show up. It's going to basically force the PR people to just like figure things out and just be like smarter with how they give access to games, which is going to be scary for, like this podcast, where we're relatively new, so we're low priority for that stuff. So like access is going to change, just because like Dave mentioned, like they're not just going to put a demo in a Dropbox and just trust 1,000 people to like access that.
Well, Valorant just did something like 2 weeks ago where they pretty much had like a super closed beta. And they had a ton of people playing that game from home, like access to it. But I'm pretty sure that they had super eyes on what you were doing, because they were also like doing the server testing and things like that. So they were keeping a close eye on what the player base was doing. But it was a way that I would love to hear more about it as time evolves, but it was a way, like there was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday where like even like streamers just didn't like gigs. He just wasn't live for like 3 days, and he just told people he was on vacation. He didn't say, but did say what he was doing. And he, somebody of his stature, like whatever, Riot was able to do was able to keep him quiet. So, it's fascinating to see, and it'll be really cool to see how companies change and adjust and evolve to trying to, get previews out or things like in the next 6 months, 6 to 8 months for sure. And we're going into a heavy fall season of possible next gen. And, we don't know. I don't know what I'm playing in October.
I don't think the manufacturers know either.
So, it'll just be really interesting and really fascinating to see how this grows, or in terms of, and like you mentioned, like a company might be able to realize like, hey, like we can accomplish the same thing and spend 80% less.
I saw a pretty good demo from a company where we basically just got 10 people in a room on Discord and did a screen share of the video and the presentation that they were going to wind up doing. And to be honest, it was almost as good as if we would have went down to the event and did the kind of face-to-face stuff. Like, of course, again, like you miss that one-to-one interaction. But for me, as the person who's going to try to make content out of that thing, they had all the stuff I needed kind of in online spaces that were behind passwords. I was like, oh, I need assets for this. They were like, here's this, here's B-roll, here's all the stuff. You know, do you need access to the producer? I was like, yeah, can we talk to those people? Like, sure, let's set up some time and figure that stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to be very difficult for them to really nail some of the stuff that we're used to. But I do think that the technology that we have right now does afford for them to be able to kind of think on the fly and do things in smart ways. It will be really bad for indie developers though. Like I think those people really need hands-on stuff. I think of Devolver all the time with the stable of games that they have. And they put on a damn good show. Like when you're like, hey, I have a Devolver appointment, like you more than likely have some good stuff to go check out.
But their games are always hard to like tell somebody why it's fun.
Yes, absolutely. And you need people who are going to be able to sit there and like sometimes walk you through the process of like why a thing is cool or why they made a decision that they made, or you know, are they even going to get enough eyes on a thing? Because that larger level of influencer that you usually see, they're not getting paid to do an indie game, conversation. They're not going to do that work. Of course, that's going to be for us because we care about that stuff. But I think that to a certain extent, like there's going to be a weird level of like missed things that happen in the space for a lot of different games and things. So I wonder how that's going to play itself out too.
All right, what's next on the docket there, bud?
Well, since we're talking about what's going to happen later this year, Bloomberg, which actually just signed Dracian Schreier to their staff.
Okay.
Yeah, they had access to some insiders at Sony, and it sounds like the PS5 will have a limited inventory than what we're used to for a console launch. The plan is still to launch this holiday, but they, according to insiders, are looking at potentially only having 5 million like units available for till the end of March 2021. So they're only going to produce 5. The cost of the system is going to look at $499 to $550 is currently what the estimate cost for the consumer is going to be. But they are, because of the parts constraint that they're dealing with right now and getting the price down on top of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's really affected what Sony's going to do this holiday with the PS5, because it completely ruined any promotional plans that they were going to have for this, which is why we have just the blog post with the controller just out of nowhere on a Tuesday. Like apparently that happened really fast, and that wasn't really like there wasn't that apparently was like almost like a rush post sort of thing where they're just like, we're just going to release the controller because I guess enough controllers made it out to developers that they're just like, okay, we need to we don't want pictures to pop up online. We're just going to do an official review on the blog post. But just to like reference what like the PS4 did, the PS4 sold 7.5 million within the first 2 quarters it was available, and that sold 7.5 million. And if these sources are right, they're only going to have 5 million consoles available in that same time frame that they sold 7.5 million last time. So it's going to be weird, man. Like this whole thing is just going to be kind of a mess. And talking about what we talked about earlier, it's just everyone's just kind of figuring things out on the fly right now. And I'm going to add a question that we were asked earlier, or asked from the community. Jacob Blaker asked, should they postpone the release of next-gen consoles? And if they do so, what do you think a release plan looks like? I feel like that is an important question for all of us to like try and determine for ourselves. Like, do we even want a console release this holiday? Like, you do, right? Okay, yeah. I see some head like, yeah. For me personally, I don't know if necessarily I want like a console release with like potentially like no games, or they're all just going to be, hey, these PS4 games work on PS5, these Xbox One games works on Xbox One Series X. But yeah, PS5 is apparently still happening. Do you guys really want a console release this holiday? Like, what do you think the holidays are going to look like in terms of what we're going through now, especially with a lot of people in economic crisis right now. Is launching a console this holiday really the best move for them? Kahlief?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of angles to that, right? Like, I think in terms of do we want the consoles to come out? Like, yeah, I want a console to come out. I'm sick of my PS4 taking 17 minutes to go from me going out of a game to going into a party chat, but that's a whole other conversation. I think that the interesting part of all these conversations is going to be not necessarily the product constraint, because I think both Microsoft and Sony are going to have this problem because a lot of their stuff is manufactured overseas in China. The interesting part is going to be who gets the most actual consoles produced. Mm-hmm. Because think about what we were all thinking about in 6 months ago when not even, well, at the Game Awards, when the Xbox Series X got announced. You know, everyone was like, oh crap, they just showed the box. They didn't expect to show the box this early. And then everyone was kind of trying to figure out when Sony was going to make their move. That conversation feels like it's all going out the window in terms of just like who's going to show what, when, and stuff. Now it's going to be, you know, who's going to be able to ramp up production fast enough to be able to get things not only produced, but shipped back here to the US so they can actually sell those things in the quantities that they're hoping to sell it. And that changes the whole idea around like everyone who's like, who's going to win the console war? Who's going to figure out who's going to do better this gen? Let me find out that the actual answer in the first year is going to be more around supply and demand than it is about, you know, customer want.
What type of plastic your console's made out of?
Yeah, like seriously, like no joke. Like like whoever's going to get out of the gate first and have the most consoles available. Like even people who are like kind of holding off to say like if there's no parity, right? And you say one console is going to come out before the other. Usually the one that comes out before usually has a leg up in terms of sales right off the bat. I think that even if there were people who were like, I was going to hold out for the other console, whatever comes out first, if they have the money, they're probably going to wind up buying it because they're just like, it's the newest thing.
Yeah.
And it's available, and I don't have to think about when it's not going to be available anymore.
I think that's the bigger question is who's going to throw the first punch, Microsoft or Sony. And what I mean by the first punch is this is how much it costs.
Yep.
Like that, you know, I don't care. I mean, at this point in time, I don't care when it's coming out. But, you know, like, again, similar lifespans to this. We were like 2 months away, you know, at this time with PS4 and Xbox One of finding out how much it costs. We found out at the E3 of the launch how much they were both going to cost. And by then we had already known that they both existed and what they were going to do. And for the most part, we knew about at least half a dozen games coming to next gen each. We don't know about any games coming. So the cost is going to be a huge thing because there's not, you know, as of right now, there's not Spider-Man 2, God of War 2. There's not, you know, we already know on Series X, there's not going to be any Series X exclusive games. So that's already something against them. And if Microsoft, like for me right now, if Microsoft comes out and says, hey, our console costs $600, like because of all this stuff that's going on and there's going to be limited quantities, like that's not good.
Well, let me sweeten the pot then. So they say $600, but new Halo Infinite drops day and date.
It's going to work on the one, though. It works on the one. They've already said it's going to work on the one.
Yeah, but it's not going to work. It's not going to be as nice on the one.
What are we going to get on the X? Like what kind of graphics are we getting on the X? We don't know yet. We're less than 6 months away from when these consoles are supposed to drop, and we don't even know what it's going to look like.
I would say at least if you use like, because the thing that's holding me down in terms of like, I think we all have an idea of what like supposed to be exponentially better, right? We just don't know how many X's are going to be better than what we currently already have, right? I think the thing I always think about in my mind is that Hellblade video that we saw that was running supposedly on that hardware. And if you say Halo is going to, and they showed that Halo video, which I think was supposedly running on that hardware too. I don't remember.
I believe it was.
It was, but even if it wasn't, we'll say the high water mark right now is what Hellblade looked like. if you tell me that thing costs $600, which is still probably a little bit out of my price range for a new console anyway. If it's at the $500 mark, I'm used to that. That makes sense to me. That's a thing that I understand. But if you say a Hellblade, whatever game comes out looks like this, I'm probably going to throw my money at it. I think it's worth it at this point, because at this point, I'm not going to look at my other old console to be like, hello, old console. I used to love to play you, but now I have this really dope new console that's going to play this that looks like this, and still think about it in that same way. So
my biggest problem with it right now is like I don't have a 4K HDR TV.
Okay.
So like that's another investment for me right now, and I haven't really needed one. I mean, I made an upgrade a couple months ago to a 144 hertz monitor, but it doesn't have an HDR support. I mean, I did a small upgrade just to start taking advantage of better frame rate playing on PC. But I'm not one of these guys too that like I can go back and forth from a 30 frame to a 60 frame game, and like it hurts for like 30 seconds and then I'm fine. So it's something, if I played something for like long stretches, like I would actually see or feel it. Like I've ran into some of those issues, but like I just don't see like me personally, and Michael's heard me say this all the time, I don't give a damn that I can see a blade of grass 100 yards away in a video game. Like that doesn't matter to me. So like it's the stuff, it's the games and the gameplay of like what is going to make me, want to play your stuff. And most of the community's already heard me say this is like right now, if you're going to tell me I need to spend $500 or $600 today on a console that's going to come out in November that doesn't have any games for either system like announced that are going to be exclusive to that system, I'm going to pump that $600 into my PC.
That makes sense.
The one thing that I love buying consoles when they launch, but I just feel like in the current climate we're in, it's hard for me to get excited for next gen just because they haven't announced it, because they really can't, and they're waiting for Xbox, which I guess Microsoft just has all their ducks in a row. Like we're not hearing anything about them having too many like manufacturing issues, and we know Halo is going to be there, and we know like Hellblade will be there, I think shortly after launch. That's fine. I'm probably leaning towards Microsoft next gen, though my gaming PC makes me think I don't need to make that jump because of how they handle their exclusives. But like with PlayStation in particular, I don't know what they're gonna have, and I'm worried that we have no idea about any games. Like we only have that one game that's announced, God's Fall.
Yeah, and
my concern is that Sony's just going to like, okay, they just want to release this holiday because they don't want to fall into the same problems they had in the 360 days, where the Xbox 360 had a year, like 6 months to a year head start. And then they just couldn't catch up until like the very end. The last like 2-3 years of PlayStation is when they like caught up. If they just force the PS5 out and the library of games on launch just aren't that impressive, I'm probably going to just wait. I feel obligated because of the podcast to just buy one of the new boxes day one. But I'm also curious about how exactly the video games that are being developed for this launch window are affected by all these studios having to switch to work from home. I won't be upset if, PlayStation slips until March next year, if that means there's a couple more games that are actually exclusive to the platform, or feel like they weren't rushed to the platform, because I feel like the launch this year just seems like a bad idea, especially they haven't been able to get the messaging out. I have no idea what the game lineups are. We haven't really even seen that many leaks in terms of like, hey, this studio is working on this game. Like we can infer things of like Insomniac's working on Spider-Man, of course, and things like that, but we haven't seen enough about this next gen. And I don't want to go into the holiday with them only being able to produce 5 million, consoles, and then we get into that like early Nintendo Wii situation of just scarcity of consoles for like 6 months to a year, to where I really want it, but I can't get it because it's being scalped by, resellers.
Well, and that's the fear, is a high price point and a low quantity like that. That's like a recipe for disaster. That's the people waiting in line for 18 to 36 hours to get a PS3 just to flip it on eBay. Like, and that happened a lot.
It's going to definitely happen with these consoles too.
Yeah.
It's absolutely going to be a thing that winds up happening.
But
the thing. Go ahead.
I just don't know if how much of a demand that's going to be without knowing anything at launch yet.
It's funny because it was a really good point that Michael made about just, what games are going to be out in the world and us not knowing a lot of information about the PS5. It would make me feel a little bit better about making a console purchase either way, knowing what I had to offer from both consoles, which kind of, I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else but me, but it feels like if I knew what I was going to hopefully get, in terms of what the technology was supposed to bring, besides the wonderful Mark Cerny presentation that they showed.
Bob Ross of video games.
I love that shit. I don't.
I know. I call him Bob Ross of video games, and I mean that with love. Like I can listen to that man talk about anything.
Because I love the fact that, really quick, I love the fact that Mark Cerny gives no fucks about your feelings. Like he's just like, yo, I'm gonna tell you this thing, I'm gonna lay it on, and I'm gonna do it in the way that I know how, and you're just gonna sit through it. If you don't like it, whatever.
Look at this picture of Dead Space.
And then tease me about Dead Space because he knows I really want Dead Space.
Yeah.
But I think that if we saw something that wasn't God's Fall, that looked, because God's Fall didn't look impressive at all, right? At least to me, it didn't.
In the 6 seconds of what you saw?
Yes, it did not look impressive. I was like, this is a PS4 game. Thank you for putting this PS4 game out. But if I could see something, show me the UI, like show me something happening on a dev kit, some version of a behind the scenes video that shows something being made on this thing that makes me want it. That would give me a better idea of like, one, what in my mind, what a visuals to price equation I'm going to have in my own head to say, like, is it worth whatever number you're going to throw at me? And then also it lets me kind of understand that, like, if I'm not seeing stuff that's worth, me trying to be one of those people who's in that line when it's supposed to drop, like, I can then make a decision to say, like, well, if it gets pushed, I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, I can say, oh, if it gets pushed, then I'm fine with that. But I'm with you, Michael, on the conversation around, like, for the show that I do, it feels like a disservice to the show to not have a new box. Yeah, and there's pressure there for sure.
Yeah. And the thing that I'm kind of getting annoyed by Sony, like me and Dave talked about this in the past, of we kind of have like an artificial deadline where we need information from them, and that's June, the E3 time, is where I need by June to know the price, 1 or 2 launch lineups. I need to know how much accessories are going to cost. I need to know features. We especially if they're going to surprise us with a $600 console, you need to give people time to save up and buy that console day one, and they need to get that rolling. I was really hoping that when they showed the controller, there was a game plan of like, hey, this week's controller, next week we're going to show you why the share button is now the create button, and just every week hit us with a little blog post. I would be happy with that. And PlayStation breaks the internet every time they reveal anything related to PS5, and I wanted that trickle thing 2 weeks ago, but now we're getting to the point where it's like, I was furloughed at work. I need to know how much this console is going to cost so I can pick it up, in the fall,
and then
I can know what to put away. And right now, they're just not really doing anything to like get excitement for it, and I don't know why I would want it other than the fact that like I like video games. Like right now, that's their plan. Is like, do you like video games? It's like, yeah. It's like, we got a new box coming eventually. Well, you might need 2 jobs for it. You might end up back in that like PS3 era of just like, you might want to work multiple jobs to buy this system.
And then we find out from that Bloomberg report that you're referencing right now is that pretty much the only reason they actually showed the controller is because they didn't want somebody else to show it.
Yes.
So they didn't really like this wasn't like, hey, we're going to show the controller April 1st or April 5th or whatever. Like that doesn't sound like that was in their plans. I'm with you, Kahlief. Like I look at stuff now. I've seen more of my friends playing video games than ever, and I've seen some people that are like playing on Xbox and playing on PC, and they're all like, and when people don't play video games and they haven't played for a while, they go back to what they know. So they go back to Call of Duty. So one of the primary selling points of Call of Duty now is cross-play. We're talking on Discord. One of the most annoying things, though, is the fact that if I want to play with a friend of mine that plays on Xbox, I can't talk to him. I mean, I don't even. I think there might be.
I mean, you can go in game chat wherever the hellscape that is. Oh yeah, it's terrible. Why hasn't that gotten better?
Yeah.
Like,
So
of all the things that have happened in the past couple of years,
Yeah.
like why hasn't game chat gotten better? Anyway.
yeah, but to the point of where like I'm with you. Like, show me the UI or say, hey, you like your Discord communities? You can use them on console now. Like anything like that, like to Michael's point, if you slide something out, like even when Xbox a couple months ago released the game loading, like the two games loading on Xbox on the one and on the Series X, like that fueled huge speculation of what people were or weren't thinking. So I get it, like everybody's working from home and stuff like that, but you still have, like this is going to be your foundation for the next 5 years. Of what your future is going to look like from a console standpoint, and there's still PS4 games that don't even have release dates, like Watch Dogs Legion. Like, we're talking about a next gen game. We're talking about a next gen console, and we're just like, my concern is that it's like, oh, it's gonna be like you're gonna see more rain on your hat in Watch Dogs. Like. Cool, sure. I'll look at it and pay attention to it for a little while. We talked about it last week, the haptic feedback on the PS5 DualSense. Like, that's going to be something that's going to be cool for the first 3 or 4 games that Sony first party puts out, and then that's going to be about it.
I mean, the beauty, the blessing and the curse of what Sony does with their technology is that they introduce really cool stuff and then never do things with it. Like the camera, the move control, the touchpad on the controller. There's a lot of cool stuff. I mean, yeah, right. Oh, you can fly around with Lair and do all stuff. Like, I mean, but the interesting part is, like, at this point, I always kind of assumed that games that were in that kind of limbo status, like Watch Dogs Legion, that's a perfect example, right? Is like, I had a feeling like that had to be a cross-gen platform game where it's like it's got to be on 4 and it's got to be on 5. It's got to be on the current Xbox and the new Xbox at some point.
But what does that mean? Like, nobody's answered what that means. Like, am I going to be buying a current gen SKU that's just going to look better on next gen, or am I going to buy a next gen SKU that won't work on my old gen?
I mean, it has to be. I think it has to be like the enhanced version of stuff like we saw prior, right? It was like, this game will run at X on your base machine, whatever machine you have now, and it'll run better and prettier on the new hardware, right? Like, they may throw some bells and whistles in it to make you kind of like be the carrot on the end of the stick. That's like, it is taking advantage of the new hardware in these ways. But I still think that, like, if you think about most of the stuff that we've seen over the past couple of years, there's been very few games that have done something very specific that changes the way that you think about game development, or the way that those things kind of attach themselves to the hardware in real ways that you're like, this couldn't be done in any other form or fashion.
Yeah, and I think
like,
that's
they just don't build games like that.
But I think that platform's even gotten narrower now because these new consoles spec wise are on par with above average PCs. And so I think that it's just kind of one of those things where Michael said, hey, we got a new box for you over here. Like, it's like, why? Like, I'm fine. I'm all for it. I'm ready for, like the stuff that Cerny talked about and stuff that Microsoft's been talking about, faster loading times, swappable, this and those features coming, because I understand that the box I'm looking at right here, that's my PS4, is almost 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to like, God forbid a Destiny reference. I'm ready for not to be able to drink an entire can of soda while I'm going to the tower.
But I think that lends to the conversation really quickly. Last point for me on this one was, I think it bolsters the PC again, and I think to a certain extent, Microsoft is in a way better position to capitalize on that, because they've determined early. This is GDC like 4 years ago, where they were like, the ecosystem is going to change. It is going to be all about putting everything on everything. xCloud, old Xbox, new Xbox. And then when they decided to put Game Pass in the mix, that changed everything for me in terms of, like, not necessarily alliances, but like my main console currently is still my PS4, right? Because of all the work that Sony did in this generation to make that happen. But now that because I'm able to stream on my PC and play games from my Xbox, that I can transfer that data over and keep those saves, or even just have the same game on two different platforms because they've thought about that. Like that changes a lot of the way that we think about the ecosystem. And I don't think Sony still to this day, even before the PS5 got announced, has addressed that in any real way yet. I'm still excited for their box. I'm going to get one at some point. Hopefully Sony send me one. Thank you. But I think it's one of those things where, you know, they still haven't nailed that part of how they're going to talk to the consumer who has their PS4 and is now on the fence, like Michael was talking about with the PS5 stuff. So they still have a long way to go to like build the case for the PS5.
Yeah.
And we just don't know when they'll begin to build that case for it because they don't know themselves.
I'm curious to see what the conversations are and not even the boardrooms of Sony, not even the boardrooms of those people. Like we know a lot of the PR folks who are working on Sony products right now. I'm just sad for them right now because they have so much juggling they have to do because no one's put any messaging out for them. You know what I mean? Like they're looking at Microsoft do stuff and they're like, we sure probably have some stuff that we could say, but we can't say any of it yet.
Yeah, and but again, like the article that Michael's referencing in Bloomberg, it sounds like, and I don't get this. Like, it's fine. It is what it is. Like, face-to-face interaction is important, but they're essentially saying because the board hasn't met together, they can't make these decisions yet. Get on a call. Like, put 20 of you on a Zoom call, like, or whatever service that you're going to use, and talk to each other.
PlayStation chat can hold 16 people.
Yeah, I'm just like, come on. And you're getting anonymous sources in there that are essentially saying because the executives haven't been able to get in the same room, who gives a damn? Like, you guys got to figure it out. Like Microsoft is essentially announced that, hey, we're going to reveal this digitally over the next 6 months. And Sony's sitting here like whether it's PR or whatever, like left hand, right hand underneath their butt, sit down.
It's a huge, but it just tells you about the huge difference between American companies and Japanese companies too.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a huge part of the way this all works too. Like imagine Nintendo trying to drop the Switch now. And how bad their messaging usually is when it comes to some of this stuff too. Like
those
they would be in the
party
same position.
ads.
Yeah, they would be in
right
the same
now.
position. Yeah, they'd be in the same position as Sony right now.
We got a social console, guys, during COVID-19.
Oh my god! Yeah, call me on your phone while you play your game so we can talk to each other. Like what? Like what kind of crack are you smoking? Anyway.
It's funny when you mentioned, you know, like we know some of the PR people. I could just imagine some of those same PR people get like a Slack from like corporate being like, hey, we're revealing a controller today. Here's the Dropbox with the pictures.
Yeah.
And
I
then
bet you they
like,
got surprised just as much as we did. I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Well, I think we talked that one pretty well. Last story, which is potentially a happy story. Jason Schreier, his last article for Kotaku. He's at Bloomberg. He's my favorite go-to writer. He updated the culture at Rockstar Games. About 18 months ago, during the Red Dead Redemption 2 release and the lead up to the release, the head of Rockstar was kind of bragging about the 100-hour weeks that people were putting in at his studio to get Red Dead Redemption 2 going. And that led to a big, issue of just crunch in game development. And Rockstar apparently have listened to the outcry and are making changes to make themselves a better studio in terms of dealing with crunch and changing the culture at Rockstar to where it seems like they're kind of removing some of the bad apples of that studio or that whole company. It's not just one studio, it's multiple studios at this point. And they are changing the way they develop games to alleviate crunch and to make the work environments just a better work environment to be at, to where people that were thinking of leaving the company are staying with the company. And one little thing that I found interesting from this article, it sounds like this is going to change how they develop stuff in the future. And they are, shocker, working on a new Grand Theft Auto game right now.
Grand Theft Auto live service.
Well, that's what I got from it.
Yep.
So Grand Theft Auto 6, it sounds like they are going to release when, it's years away, but they're looking at a way to alleviate crunch of just releasing not like the full thing right away. Like it's what they would release is still going to be like big because it's Rockstar, but it might not be like the full thing. Like they're going to kind of release it almost piecemeal or find a way to release it to where they don't have to have 100-hour crunch all the time leading up to the launch of the game, that they can kind of stretch out that work and then also stretch out the game to where, to me, that sounds like a live service Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto Online, very, very popular. So there was that little piece from that. Kahlief, I don't know. You probably talk to a lot of developers, but like crunch is a huge thing. From the people you've talked to, have you heard anything about that crunch culture shifting a little bit?
Not directly around a Rockstar, but in terms of
in general.
In general, sure. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, the interesting parts have been mostly around, what we have determined crunch is in terms of the scope of a project. I think that most folks sadly kind of already think that crunch is a part of the way a game gets made. Like you have to involve crunch to get a thing done. I think the thing that's changing a lot is the philosophies around not only the way that that's supposed to kind of work, but also I think a lot of developers right now are specifically like trying to figure out ways to avoid it from a unionization standpoint, from a kind of how a game gets produced way that it all kind of works. I don't know to a certain extent. Like I agree with both of you that this is definitely going to be a live service game. I think if anybody can make this actually happen, it would be Rockstar in a good way because they've done so good with the online portions of Grand Theft Auto. Like that game still is in the top 10 in terms of sales probably every month at some point because they've done so well with that kind of stuff.
It's technically a prior gen game.
Yeah, it's like 2 generations basically at this point, right? It's like bridge that kind of gap. I do wonder though. I think the conversation I have with devs often is about what does work culture look like in real ways. I think COVID in a weird way has been a blessing and a curse because of that. Because a lot of the things that we have talked about in terms of how a game gets made, and how long you need to stay at the studio, you kind of sometimes work a little bit more when you're at home because you're at home. Like time just winds up kind of moving around in different ways. But I think also the ability to kind of virtualize your office has changed the way that we should see development happen in the future. I don't know if Rockstar is going to get credit for kind of changing things up, which I don't think they will. I think Jason Schreier's work is fantastic for spotlighting this stuff, but the gaming industry and a lot of folks who I know who are kind of on the more woke side of the fence aren't going to give them credit for actually making the changes that they asked them to make, which is going to be interesting to see how that plays itself out. But in terms of happy story versus not happy story, like I'm happy to hear that Rockstar is like taking that criticism to heart, was really trying to figure out good ways to bridge those gaps and make things better for their employees. It is interesting to see the conversation shift from Rockstar to Naughty Dog in the past couple of weeks too, yeah. Which has been really interesting because I feel like Naughty Dog of all the companies, Rockstar was always kind of the like, hey, those guys are kind of dicks. But now some of that has shifted over, and that's not me saying that. That's people in the industry.
I'm clipping that. Don't worry.
Yeah, clip that. Put that on my reel. But I think that the interesting part has been how other companies are adjusting to crunch in real ways, and it's weird because so many companies that you would think have figured it out, Rockstar, Naughty Dog, CD Projekt Red, like there's been so many conversations around all those big games that are coming out involving crunch. It makes me wonder, like, can you scope down a game and still make it a big blockbuster game without crunch? I still haven't seen that answer come across my feeds. And it was a great article that happened a couple of months ago that basically said, all the things that folks are kind of doing to help mitigate crunch don't actually help with crunch. They still wind up happening in other ways anyway.
And then the gaming community jumps all over the developer. So, and again, like it's whether it's Anthem, like we heard about all the problems that Anthem had, and then where BioWare was trying not to do something like this, and then you get a game like Anthem, and people are like, well, you should have worked harder on your game, and it's like,
right,
or we're seeing it a lot. Again, Kahlief and I both play Destiny. They're having content problems in Destiny. And they're being honest about, hey, we're working from home. This is a challenge. Fixing these things is harder than we anticipated. And the gamer's like, I don't care. I can't play my game. Like but then when Jason Schreier writes an article about, the salaried employees working 75 hours a week. Well, that's not fair. Well, but you just tell them over there that you want content in the game and you don't really want to pay for it. So it's like,
yep, you're absolutely right on all accounts. Like that's the hardest part, right? Is like, there's this want for this altruistic utopian version of game development, and it's not like that. Like it's just never going to be in that respect. Of course you can make better decisions about your timelines and building out enough space for some of that stuff, but I think the thing that the kind of gaming press who likes to rally against crunch all the time doesn't really talk about is this voracious want from the consumer. And the consumer is a huge part of the ecosystem too. Like we've been trained to have an expectation for a certain amount of content to come out at a certain amount of time at a certain clip. And we've seen it over the past at least 2 years where, last year alone, if you looked at your content schedule of stuff that was coming out, there was 2 or 3 games coming out at least every week, right? It may not be the biggest game in the world, might not be the best game in the world, but there was stuff coming out every couple of days for weeks at a time for a whole year. And people got used to that, got spoiled. And now if you were to say, hey, we need to push out your favorite game that you've been looking forward to for 2 years now, another 6 months, people freak the hell out, right? Like Cyberpunk got pushed to September and people were already upset about it missing its April date. But now September is, oh my God, what are we going to do about no Cyberpunk until September? But, those folks also finished the game fairly early not early, but they had finished it at the time that they wanted to. And now they're just polishing things up. Right. So the expectations have to change too, not only from the press and from the publisher and the production side, but from the consumer too. Like you have to have better expectations for the way things work.
Square's going through it with Final Fantasy VII Remake right now. There's a lot of people that are criticizing them for, making the game episodic.
Me.
And
absolutely.
But look how long it took just to get this. Like, and it's like, if you wanted Final Fantasy VII from start to finish, fully remade, like, do you want to play it on PS6? And it's like, we look at a company like Rockstar, like they released one game this gen, technically.
Yes.
One game. And it was Red Dead 2. And that's with the terrible working conditions. Like, when do we think GTA 6 is going to come out? If they from a public relations standpoint are reducing their working conditions, like we're not going to see GTA 6 until Rockstar's already a company that does what they want when they want. Like we're not going to see this until 2023, 2024 at this point. And then people still buying GTA 5 aren't making them accelerate this timeline at all.
Nope.
Nope.
Yeah, but I think it's a great point that like we don't focus enough on like the consumer demands in terms of correlation with crunch. Last year, there was when Respawn said that they're going to update Apex like every was it like 3 months or like I forgot exactly the timeline, but people that play Apex were upset about how slow changes were coming, and then they would point to Fortnite of like Fortnite can change something in a day, and it's just like that's because Fortnite is they have Fortnite money. And the consumers were kind of pissed at Apex because they, were like, hey, we're not going to kill our team to balance things or add new content. But eventually the Apex fans accepted that timeline, and Apex has been rolling at a pretty generous like clip of like new content, and the community just had to get groomed to accept that in comparison to other games. And that's just kind of what developers are going to need to do. Like we need like Rockstar to, you know, to do that with Grand Theft Auto, which technically it's just going to be the Final Fantasy VII remake. Potentially it's going to be that sort of thing where it's just like, hey, here's chunk one of the game. See you in a couple years. Hopefully a new console doesn't come out in between 1 and 2. That's going to make
and then the
like
consumer again is going to criticize them because when GTA 6 gets reviewed, they're going to say, I wonder what was taken out of this game that you still charge me $60 for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or $80 or $70 or whatever it ends up being. And that's always a huge concern. And, like I applaud Respawn for what they were doing and sticking to their guns, because the spotlight has been shined on Epic a little bit too, of that environment, of the Fortnite environment, of what they put their staff through as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can turn something on in a day. It's because 3 or 4 dudes worked overnight to do it. And is that
it showed itself in the balance of that game. It showed itself in the ways the community came to kind of attach themselves to the meta of that game. And Respawn was super smart to say, no, that we're a smaller company. We're not going to do it like the other folks are doing it, and we're not going to kill our people to get you the thing that you're going to complain about 2 days later anyway. Like, you know what I mean? That's the hard part, is like this balance between you as a company trying to figure out good ways to balance out, making sure your staff is okay, deadlines for content, and then this like need from a consumer standpoint to keep getting new stuff all the time. Like that's the blessing and the curse of a live service game at this point, is like we need to keep pumping things out, because if we don't, then people get bored and they move on. So I don't know how you fix that. Like that's the thing, I just literally don't know how you fix, unless you do what Respawn and other folks have done and said, just chill out. We'll get you stuff when you get stuff.
It's gonna basically take the heavy hitters that know that no matter what they do, they're not gonna lose their audience to make those moves, and then other studios can then follow suit of being like, hey, we're just doing the Apex Legend route, or we're doing the Grand Theft Auto 6 route, or Cyberpunk, and like take their time. But even then, like Cyberpunk, when it got delayed to September, they asked them like, does this mean crunch is going to be less of a problem? And they were like, nah. No. They're like, we're not going to stop crunching. We can't. It's going to come down to, I also think a big thing, to sidetrack myself, is just when games are announced and when they're released. I think that is a problem, because though that might now change since we no longer have an E3 competition every year potentially, to where things were just being announced just because they needed to fill 90 minutes in one day. And we're announcing stuff way too early when they shouldn't have. And then that just leads to a whole other thing where you put these artificial deadlines, and then they have to crunch to meet that deadline. And then when they find out like a month beforehand that they're not going to meet that deadline, they move it, and then fans get pissed, and then they crunch again to another artificial deadline, as opposed to letting things work out organically. So there's a lot of things that play into crunch. It's like consumers, publishers figuring out like how to set deadlines, and then just work practice like things, just general things to make the life of the employees better.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so that is the news. A little bit of an extended segment for you guys here, but that's expected with a guest and another voice that you haven't heard from before. So speaking of that voice, we're going to move on to playing and watching. So Kahlief, what have you been playing recently?
Ooh, I am currently playing Gears Tactics, which I can't talk about because there's an embargo and I can't talk about that yet. I've been playing a crap ton of COD, and playing a whole bunch of what's the latest game that I play? I played Treachery in Beatdown City, which is a fantastic side scroller. It looks like Double Dragon, but it has turn-based RPG elements to it. It was super, super dope, like really funny, really, really well written. And I started to play that the other day just to check it out, and especially because I've been following that game for a very long time. So I would say, get a chance to check that out. Please.
What's it called again?
Treachery in Beatdown City. It's basically like if you took bad dudes, the idea around bad dudes kidnapping someone in this case, it's Barack Obama that they that they are kidnapping, and then it's very New York centric, which is pretty cool. And then taking that person, and you have this ragtag group of folks who go to basically go and save him from this ninja clan. It's super cool. It's super fun. And what else have I been playing? I've been playing a lot of MLB The Show of like MLB The Show has been my go to bed game of late, which I didn't think that was going to be the thing. I finally have my character. His name is Leafy Greens, and he is in the he's en route to the show. He's doing not too well. He's like batting like 260 because he's fat like me and has slow response times. But that's definitely a thing I've been playing a bunch of. And then the last thing has been just watching a whole bunch of documentaries, like the Last Dance documentary. I'm sure folks have been talking about that all over the place with the Jordan stuff. That is just giving me PTSD as a Knicks fan to see how many people
try being a Pistons fan. I can't. Like next week, we're gonna be enemy number one next week, man.
The beauty of that, the beauty of this series is like every sports fan, every team is watching their teams get their ass beat by Jordan throughout this whole season.
Yeah, but man, episode 3 is gonna focus on the Jordan rules. Like, oh my gosh.
Oh, it's gonna be so good because it's like the beauty of it is like it was definitely this era of basketball. I'm sorry to sidetrack to basketball, but it's this definitely
we'll talk about it because I think
we have a question for it, so we'll just do it now. We'll just talk.
Yeah.
We'll just talk The Last Dance right now.
Oh yeah, drop the question and then we can jump.
Oh no, he just said go off basically. He just wants us to just go off on Last Dance. So
okay, it's gonna be so dope.
Well, hold up. You got to admit your first mistake.
I'm a Knicks fan. Yeah.
No, beside that, your mistake you made last night.
Oh, I watched. I didn't know that it was 2 episodes every time that they drop a new one. I just watched the first one, and then I saw all these other people talking about Scottie Pippen, and I was like, "What the fuck happened? What did I miss? Like, why are they talking about Scottie Pippen? He was like hardly in the damn episode."
Keep in mind, again, like I mentioned, Kahlief's on the West Coast, so he watched this at 7:00, and then at 8:00 at night, like turned the TV off and walked away.
I did. I was watching it. I was literally watching it in this seat on my TV on my monitor because I was streaming it. And then I was like, why? Like, I woke up the next day and I was like, yo, what happened to all the Scottie Pippen information that I didn't see in this thing? Luckily, I DVR'd it, so I'm happy about that. But it is going to be this weird, dope ride through hip hop and through music and through culture. And then every time I see Michael Jordan get clotheslined, it just makes my heart sing. Because that was like the beautiful part of 90s basketball was it's like, and I love current basketball, the way it has changed. But there is something so special about watching big ass dudes just knock the hell out of each other for no reason while they're supposed to be playing basketball. I'm really excited to see Bill Laimbeer just punch the shit out of
like it's gonna be Laimbeer and Mahorn and like
it's gonna be so good. So good.
So it's fascinating, like growing up in the as a Pistons fan, and but it's hard because you have this. I mean, especially as I've even gotten older, and I had my shoe addiction for a while. That I was, when I sold shoes and I worked in the company in the shoe industry before I switched to the other retail that I'm in. The culture around Michael Jordan and what he did for fashion and what he did for the game, like as much as you hate him for him torching your team or just like killing any kind of dynasty or elemental chance that you had at doing something from 1992 to 98, you also, as you've gotten older, like the respect you have for what he has done, like it is you watch the thing and you're like, he just killed people. Like the thing that was most fascinating was that I didn't know is like they spent a lot of time focusing on like 84 to like 89, like as the Bulls were rising, and when he broke his foot and like he went back to college and he was playing at college when he really wasn't supposed to be, and then the minute restrictions that he was on and just all the stuff that they were trying to do of like tanking in the late 80s of what we would see now, and how he was like annoyed by it. He's like, I'm not here to lose games, like and I'm fine and let me play. And they're like, well, and he's so it's fascinating of every, whether it's a documentary or a movie, has a villain, and right now the villain is being portrayed as Reinsdorf. Or no, I'm sorry,
Oh,
Yeah,
Kraus.
yeah, no,
Jerry
yeah.
Krause.
Kraus, yeah. Reinsdorf is the owner. I'm sorry.
No, Reinsdorf's I'm from Chicago. Reinsdorf's very much a villain in this to this day.
Yeah, and
I
just
guess
the portrayal of that is interesting to see, like how, like you had, for whatever reason, like, and I guess maybe I wasn't paying attention in the mid '90s to this, but you had the greatest basketball coach with the greatest basketball player, and you're like, yeah, we're done after this year. Like, what?
the two things, like three things that really popped up from at least the first episode, because I haven't seen the second one. Was Jerry Krause's the parallels between Jerry Krause back then and James Dolan now, who is the general manager of the Knicks. That was really, really interesting to see. Two, I've never heard an NBA rookie who's coming out of college early say the transition from the college game to the NBA game was easy. He said that in the documentary. He was like, the dude in the show was like, so how's the transition been for you? You just came out of college. He was like, it's been pretty easy. I've never heard that from any other player in my lifetime actually say that out loud and mean it, and not joke around about that thing.
And in retrospect, though, he's like the only one that can get away with saying that, if you think about it.
Yeah, and that was the thing that killed me, was just like the brashness of this young cat who was just like, I don't care. I'm going after the biggest dude on the team. I'm going to make that person. And it was like, when you make James Worthy tap out, like, that's nuts. Like, that's crazy. You made one of the best players of all time be like, nah, this young cat has got me. And then the last part that just like really struck me, because again, like, I'm totally with you, Dave. Like I was a person who hated Jordan during his heyday. I used to hate that man with every, like, the fire of 10 suns. I had a girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend, for one of my birthdays, bought me a pair of Jordans, and I never wore them because I hated Jordan. And it was funny because, like, I looked at the first initial screen that came up, and he was walking down, I think it was in Paris where they were doing the Paris game, and he just had his jersey on, and he was like running down and it didn't really dawn on me that number alone is just automatically tied to him. Like, anybody who wears 23 in anything, I automatically think of Michael Jordan. And that's a crazy thing to like reconcile in your brain. That person has like transcended into such an interesting space that a number is just a thing that is like synonymous with them forever. Like, I don't think about Kobe in that way. He's the closest thing that we've ever had to Jordan in terms of the Killer Instinct version of it.
Right.
And even when, like, 8 and 24 still don't even have the same thing as like 23 does.
If he wouldn't have switched, I think maybe it could have been that. I think
if he would have stuck with his original number, then I think that totally would have been a thing. But it is definitely like, it's the reason why he had 24, because he wanted to be one better than Jordan, right? So it's like, even in that respect, it's still an homage to him in that way. It's super good. I'm excited to see the rest of this thing, and ESPN is going to blow up because they have no other stuff to show.
This is like my local sports radio host is like, this is Sunday night football for the next 5 weeks. And because like the draft is this week, which is like, NFL draft is this week, which I'm super excited about, because it's like going to be the first true live event we've had, sporting event we've had like in a month. But like episode 2 focused a lot on Scottie Pippen and some of the problems that he was having with the organization. And then just the thing that I was most fascinated about is that I didn't realize this, is that Jordan, like, his rookie contract was like 3 or 4 years, and then he signed another like 4 or 5 year deal that was anywhere that went from $3.5 million to $4 million. His next contract then went up to $33 million. Like, in terms of, he was part of the up climb of people, the revenue in the NBA went through the roof with him. So like that story is just fascinating, and how that team was constructed, and it's just like, even if you're not an avid sports or basketball fan, like, this documentary I think is worth your time to watch. One, because there's really nothing else to watch right now, and then two, it's just, if you want to know like how a person can transcend a sport, like, this is how it happens.
Yeah. So. And for, you talk about, you're New York, you're Detroit. I'm Chicago, so I grew up during all this. So I'm just getting like the nostalgia of seeing all this. And I just remember being a kid in the city of Chicago during all that, and just watching like the first, the first documentary. I just immediately get flashbacks to uh, being a little kid, and then my neighborhood before it turned into a real bad neighborhood was around that Bulls. So I associate my neighborhood going bad with the decline of the Chicago Bulls, because I swear it happened. That transition was like the Bulls got their last championship, and then my neighborhood was like a mess, and so were the Bulls. But I remember as a little kid, just, all the Bulls stuff happening, to where that was the only sport and the only team that mattered. I mean, you had the Bears were shit. The Cubs only had Sosa, Mark McGwire in the 90s, the Sosa, Mark McGwire thing going for them, the home run thing. The Blackhawks weren't on TV because they didn't have a TV contract until, Patrick Kane a couple years ago. And, the White Sox, got robbed of a World Series in the early 90s. So there was like nothing happening except the Bulls. So growing up there as a kid, I just remember like my whole neighborhood during the finals, every TV in that neighborhood would have the finals on and their front door open. And you could just see the game and hear the game walking down the street, and you could just literally walk into your neighbor's house and be like, what's the score? And then just chill with them. And soon as the games were over, everyone just kind of like had like a mini block party. And by mini block party, I mean just drinking heavily, where you just go out there. Like that was like the only time, like as a kid, I'm like, 5, 6 years old, and it would be like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I was allowed to run in the street with my friends because all the adults were just talking about the game that just happened. Like I remember all of that stuff in Chicago, like how, like Michael Jordan, how iconic he was, and just like all the other players. I remember all the meet and greets the Bulls would do during, the season. Like I've met Steve Kerr a couple times as a little kid. I've met Scottie Pippen a couple of times as a little kid. Never met Jordan as a kid, just because he was just one of those ones you would never go to a Michael Jordan meet and greet because they were chaotic. They were a nightmare of all the people. Like when they talk about in the first episode where Michael Jordan in Paris was like, the Beatles coming to America the first time. That's how like everything Jordan did in the city was for that time. Like it was crazy. And just watching that, I'm getting like good feelings. You guys are going to have to deal with, like, well, at least Dave's going to have like the first half of that the first half of that episode is going to be the Detroit Pistons beating the shit out of, young Michael Jordan, physically beating the shit out of young Michael Jordan. But then it's going to turn into they couldn't do anything to the Bulls after that. To me, I'm watching this, I'm just like, that was a really good time. And then I just get frustrated thinking of like the Bulls afterwards, like seeing Jerry Krause. I haven't seen his face in years. And seeing him in the documentary, I'm just like, oh, I hate this man. Yep. And seeing Jerry Reinsdorf, who like, I'm a Sox fan too, and he owns both the Sox and the Bulls. And I'm seeing him and I'm just like, I hate you too, because currently in Chicago, depending on what team he wants to win that year is going to determine the budget for that team going into the offseason. So it's always that thing of just like, when you see him sell assets on one team, the other team might make a run for it. So he's kind of a villain that way, depending on like how you're feeling with like how the Bulls are going or how the Sox are going. So seeing them and then seeing Jerry Krause, though, even though I hate Jerry Krause, I did kind of feel bad for him because Jordan was kind of a dick to him, like just like making fun out of him. They showed multiple clips where Jordan's just roasting him.
Oh, he was getting roasted.
Pippen too, man.
Yeah,
he's getting roasted. I was like, yeah.
Well, and
no wonder he hated them.
Yeah, and the thing that ultimately really sucks about this is Jerry Krause is no longer with us. So he can't even like publicly, say anything.
Right.
Yeah, he can't even come out and like and as this documentary, it's like he's undefendable. Like he can't defend himself. So
damn. Didn't think about that.
Yeah, so it's just interesting. Like, and this is getting 50% more eyes on it than it ever would because of what's going on right now. I think I heard something like Darren Ravel tweeted out today that it drew like 44% the same audience that would have watched an NBA Finals game, which is crazy numbers for a documentary.
I mean, it's about the biggest NBA star to have ever lived at this point. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think the NFL draft on Thursday night is gonna get near Super Bowl level ratings.
Do you think so? Really?
I don't think so.
There's nothing else to watch.
Yeah, but it's the draft, though.
But it's the first live sporting event, and you can't watch basketball, you can't watch baseball, you can't watch
excuse
hockey.
me, wrestling?
Well, how's that working out? Are any of your wrestlers still employed?
39 of them aren't. The good ones are still employed.
This week.
Yeah, I do wonder though, like, you know, we already know a little bit of the kind of the way the story is going to wind up playing out, especially because all of it is in the past and we've seen all those things kind of go into it. I think the most interesting bit was seeing just how much access the folks got with the team, because that's the thing you don't really see often at all anymore.
And they sat on it for 23 years.
That's the madness part, right? Is like they sat on that thing for so long.
Or maybe not 20. I mean, it's taken 23 years to come out, so maybe they've been working on it for the last 3 years, probably. So like this footage has been like dug up, and not dug up, but like Jordan had to sign off on this apparently because he's all over this, by the way, and he never talks. Like
nope.
And he is all over this. He wasn't, even when he was the owner of the Bobcats, like he wasn't talking.
Yeah,
this man's talking about lines in hotel rooms.
Yeah,
like
I mean, it's all the information that you always wanted, right?
Yeah,
it's like you know all the stuff that's happening in those spaces.
Can't
like
wait for Rodman stuff.
Rodman stuff is going to be nuts. And also, and the thing that bugged me out, and I made a shitty joke on Twitter the other day. I was like, because they showed the like 5 players.
I saw this where you were like, "Where's Bushler?"
I was like, "Yo, where's Jed Bushler at right now? Why are you not giving Jed Bushler any love?" But it also makes you really think about like, where's Horace Grant and all this stuff? Like, there's no Horace Grant stuff. Which is weird. Like, he was like, when I think of the people who like made that team, I really don't think about Kerr.
Mm-hmm.
I think of like if there's gonna like the secondary people who are like not Jordan Pippen, I think of Horace Grant. I think of John Paxton, who didn't get any love in any of this stuff, which I think is really interesting too. But it makes me think about the NBA 2K version that had all the versions of the Jordan era throughout the times that he was playing, and kind of like took those segments and did something like that. I would love to see them do something like that again. That's kind of like connected to this, like bring that mode out again, or you know, figure out a way to incorporate some Jordan stuff into the game now, because you have the likeness. He's in the game. Like, there's good ways you could use that content, but this is going to be a thing that's going to be talked about for months on end.
Yeah, I mean, it's 5 weeks and it's 2 episodes a week.
Shut up.
Or you get a VPN and then watch it on Netflix, because it's available in its entirety, I think, on Netflix in other countries. It might be.
Really? Oh, man.
It's either that or they're doing it piecemeal as well, but it's on Netflix in other countries. So I don't know if all the episodes are available or if ESPN made them only release 2 a week, which is possible. Yeah. But I'm probably going to look into a VPN tonight just so I can try it out and see.
Let me know.
Yeah. Because if all of them are available,
spoil it for everybody ahead of the internet.
All right.
Hey, on episode 8, this is what happened.
So have you been playing anything else or watching anything else, or?
I think that's it. I think What We Do in the Shadows came back, so I'm excited about that. That's a fantastic show. And I've been playing just like random stuff. Like, I'm trying to get through some of my backlog. I re-downloaded Uncharted 4 for some strange reason. I don't know why I did that. I'm still trying to figure out how to play make music in dreams, which is another thing. Yeah, so it's kind of all over the place right now, because I don't know what time or day things are anymore, because it's damn quarantine.
Yeah, my boss asked me that. He's like, "You want a certain day off next week?" I'm like, "No." I was like, sure, like Thursday, Friday. I don't know. Like, it's not like, you got the weekend off. Like, and
yeah, basically.
All right, Michael, what about you?
If you want to go, just because I have a quick review to do.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I've been messing around a little bit more in Zelda, kind of getting a little drawn out on the Breath of the Wild. Kai, I don't even know if you know this. I picked the Switch up like 2 months ago. So,
nice.
And I been a little bit of more Owen been playing it. But I mean, he's been going through like Mario Odyssey, but I've always been a huge Zelda fan, and this is one that I hadn't played for a while, or ever. And so I've been playing a little bit of Breath of the Wild. I'm getting through, and like I said before, the open world part is cool, but it's also an annoyance for me because I just kind of want to know where I'm supposed to go and when, and how I'm supposed to do it. So I'm getting to the point where like I feel like there's filler in this game where you have to go do other things to get stronger to do this, and it's a little bit of a nuisance versus just being able to just go through the story and get the next piece that progresses you through to get the next piece that progresses you through. So that's kind of giving me a little bit of a hard time, like of the desire to continue to go through. Like when I sit down and play and I start progressing, I'm having a good time, and the little talking to characters and the tidbits of the Zelda universe are always intriguing to me. And like when I sit down and play, I end up playing for like an hour or 2 hours. So like it's great, but it's getting a little annoying right now. And there's one particular boss that I'm just having a hard time with, and it's just irritating. And then I finally, and I've had a lot of just physical exhaustion when I come home from work, like where I haven't really been wanting to play a lot of games. I'm working a relatively set schedule, and anybody else that works in retail knows that can mess with your head more than anything, as having a consistent set schedule. And I'm also pretty much doing the same thing every day versus before when we were open for business and doing some other things. Like every day would be a little different. Like, yeah, we still help customers and put merchandise away, but there was always something new or something to change or something to build. And now I'm just taping boxes up and putting product in boxes and sending them out the back door all day. So that's messing with me a little bit, but I did get enough energy to at least play a couple hours of Final Fantasy VII Remake. I didn't realize that. For some reason I thought the demo took place a little farther in the game. I didn't know it was like at the very beginning of the game. But it definitely, from the demo to the first 2 or 3 hours that I played, I did stream it the other day. The game, the demo to the current release definitely feels a lot smoother. The movement and the way that the combat is, and the tutorials are a little bit better than they were in the demo. So it definitely did clean it up a little bit. It's, again, there's nothing that's happened that's grasped me yet, but I also do understand that this is at its core a JRPG, so it's going to take some time for the story to flesh out, but it looks really, really good. And it plays smooth and it plays well. I will be going back and playing that, but for the most part, like, my wife and I just ended up binge watching a ton of shows. Like we've been mentioning, we've been watching a lot of Boy Meets World again, just because.
Where were you at?
I think we're in season 5. I think.
I don't know what that means. Are they broken up, back together, broken up, back together?
I don't remember. Sean's brother just got introduced, and Sean and his brother and Eric are all living in an apartment together.
Senior year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which totally fascinating that a senior year of high school, he just goes to live with his brother and still goes to the same school, and it's just like, okay, this guy Sean has lived with like 3 different people in like this between his sophomore and senior year of high school. But and then like we just been going through, just like we watched The Last Dance together. My wife watched that with me as well. She's a pretty big sports fan, and she's interested in those things. And then just going through, like, watching, like, caught up on like The Rookie, like just a bunch of like my cops crime dramas that we watch all the time together. Just a lot of time with family when I come home. Like, everybody's home. I do, and I said this to my wife, so when she hears this, she's not gonna be mad at me. I do miss my multiple hours at least once a week of nobody being home. Because you'd have a random Tuesday or Wednesday off, and my wife would be at work, my kids would be at school, and it would just be me. Whether it was me wanting to watch TV or just lay around or play a video game or whatever. I don't have any of that, and I'm working with the same 4 or 5 people, and I come home and it's the same 4 or 5 people, and it's great. I love my family, but this is the part that's changed the dynamic for us. Everybody, like, at its core, if you talk to me, like, my day-to-day routine is not that different right now, except for I don't have the time, and I fully understand what my wife says now when she's like, here, take the kid, I'm going to be gone for like an hour. Like, I get it. So yeah, that's pretty much what for the most part, I dabbled to just I upgraded my internet, so I was doing some offline testing of the streams and checking for drop frames and things like that, and I just, the easiest way for me to test a game is just to play Destiny. I played it for like an hour, if that. And it's interesting. They've got an event coming out this week that I'll probably check out and see if it's worth playing. There's a 2-week event I'll probably go in there and get the couple things I need to get and just be done and move on and hope that, what they bring out next season is better. So.
All right. For me, still playing Animal Crossing way too much. I think I'm like winding down on Animal Crossing. It was a game I'd play for like multiple hours a day, but there's no events. I kind of paid off most of my debts, and my island has got enough of an infrastructure that there's nothing to work towards till the next event. So now I'm just like casually hopping into Animal Crossing just to, sounds weird, check my mailbox and do basic chores. It's weird. Quarantine does things to you. So you're just like, it's just something to do. So I like daily check in on Animal Crossing is still going, and playing Overwatch, which has been going better than usual, probably because the season's going to end soon. It's usually when I end up playing well. And then a lot of Rock Band 4 with Sarah. It's one of those things where we're always looking for like a co-op game to play. I mean, we're both like in quarantine together, so it's just like need co-op games to play. And we realized that like we only listen to music on our commutes to work. So we haven't been listening to music and we really miss it. So it's just like, okay, Rock Band fills that need of listening to music and also having a co-op game to play with each other. So we've been playing a lot of Rock Band, staying up way too late. I don't know about you guys, but like my sleep cycle is like way off, now, to where it's just like, she's working from home, so like she needs to be up at a certain time, but because she doesn't have to commute to work, she can stay up till like 2 a.m. and still be good to be at the desk in the other room by 8 o'clock in the morning. So like playing Rock Band to like 1 o'clock, 2 a.m.
That's kind of great.
Yeah, it's been pretty fun playing Rock Band again. And then a game I'm just going to do a quick review for. It's In Other Waters. It's a game that's on the Switch. It is from the developers. I just had their name up. Jump Over the Age and the publisher's Fellow Traveler. So this is a narrative-focused exploration game in which you play as an AI system that's guiding a scientist through the waters of an alien planet. The scientist is looking for their colleague who is already on that planet, who just kind of disappeared, and you're assisting the human as you play this AI in finding their colleague, or the person's colleague and mentor, and also logging all the species and life that you find in the waters of this alien planet. So your perspective from the game is, just because you're this AI, is a sonar map, like an ocean or like a sea map. So it's very like simplified in how everything looks, and it just uses like just green and blue colors with just like outlines of structures and things in the water. So all you have access to is the map and the basic controls of you managing the oxygen to keep the human alive, and the power so you can keep exploring and finding and logging species while looking for this missing person. So the game is pretty open in terms of like what you need to do. Like you have your objective, it'll mark things on the map of like, hey, check out this area. We need to sample things here. Or there might be a signal that leads us to the missing person. But it doesn't direct you to like do things in order. It's just kind of up to you to just explore and log as much data as you can. The story for it is actually deeper than I thought it was going to be, especially for like the abstract view. All the story is done through just like little dialogue options. The scientist will communicate with you, and you can do yes or no responses. And the writing's really smart in terms of like the person knows they're talking to an AI, so they will, sometimes second guess themselves and question like what type of AI you are, because you can respond in yes or no answers. So there's a little bit of mystery behind that in terms of she's never worked with an AI quite like this before, because you're the AI. So the story that the main story is really well told, and the game, despite its like simple like visual style, it really like pulls you in with the music and the atmosphere that they're able to do with the sound design in the game. So that's been really like fascinating, and I've been logging more and more stuff. Like I wasn't expecting to spend like 7 or 8 hours just exploring and ignoring the story. Like I wasn't expecting myself to just be interested in logging stuff. And because it's that simple C map, that sonar map, when I find a creature, all I'm doing is holding my like radar on a dot. And then in the dialogue, it'll just pop up like, oh, that creature is super fascinating. And it'll describe that creature in great detail. And you'll be like, oh, I want to learn more about that creature. But all I'm looking at is a little dot on the map. But the writing is so well done that I'm like, I need to find more dots like that because I want to know what that creature does. And the game has like basic puzzles to where you'll grab like microorganisms, like bacteria and other like objects, and you'll use that to like clear paths, or some of them can help power your suit so you can extend your time, because you have limited oxygen before you go back to your base, or in limited power. So you sometimes have to, if you can't find objects, you just have to kind of go on a path and be like, okay, I have like 3 minutes worth of oxygen. I need to take care of what I can for this 3 minutes and log as much as I can, and then head back to base safely. So then I can start again. But now I'll know a path, so I'll be able to go through that faster the next time I have to go through that. So I've been enjoying it a lot. I will say I'm playing it on a Switch. It does have some freezing issues the later you get into the game, which is kind of a bummer, but it's not the worst problem I've had in a game. Like, it'll hitch every once in a while, which can sometimes take you out of it, but because of the way the game is, shown, and there's nothing crazy, it's not an action game, it's not a violent game. So the freezing and hitching isn't like a killer to the experience. It's just a minor inconvenience. But for a game that I put like 12 hours into, it's great, and I highly recommend it. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I want to say if you're looking for like a chill game to play with a good story, this is definitely worth picking up on the Switch. It's like $15, I believe. And the music alone is worth checking out. Like, it's one of those games that I like downloaded like the soundtrack, and it's just now like background music when I find something to do with it to play in the background. Like, I loaded it to my phone, and I'm just waiting for a project so then I can listen to that music while I'm working on the project. But that's been my primary thing that I've been doing, is playing that game, and I again highly recommend it. 4 out of 5. But in terms of anything else that I've been doing, I've been watching Disney movies, actually using my Disney Plus. But that's pretty much it. I saw Monsters Inc. for the first time. That was on my shame list of movies I haven't seen. Princess and the Frog for the first time, and Tangled for the first time. And now I'm just going to go through Big Hero 6 for the first time, Onward, and Monsters University are like my next 3 movies I haven't seen yet. But that's it for me.
All right.
Nice.
So we're going to move on to a couple questions. We've answered a few of them already, but you can send us questions using hashtag AskDigitalDays. You can post them in our Facebook group, on the Facebook page, through Twitter, Discord, all of it. The links to all that stuff is in the show notes. One of the questions from Billy503 Solid on Twitter. So what are your thoughts regarding the remake of Final Fantasy VII in general and the episodic thing about it? And would you suggest that Square Enix remake other Final Fantasy games, and which one would you like to see remade? So, Kahlief, you made a small comment about this already, so I'd like to hear what you have to say.
The problem is I don't want to do the whole and listen to Spawn on Me's next episode because
absolutely,
blah, blah, blah.
That's what you should do.
Listen to Spawn on Me next episode because We talk all about Final Fantasy VII Remake. When is this going live? I always forget, just in case.
Thursday. So
This will be also Thursday of next week?
yeah, so the 23rd.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thursday this week.
Okay. Oh, Thursday this week.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
like 3 days.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, definitely stick around until tomorrow when this bad boy goes up. Well, actually, 2 days ago you should have listened to it.
I'll make sure there's a link to Kahlief show in the show notes.
Yeah, but the TLDR is I'm disappointed in the character building of this particular game. I did not know that this was going to be a episodic kind of thing when I went into Final Fantasy VII Remake. I don't know how I missed that.
Do you live under a rock?
I totally missed that.
They haven't been upfront about it, to be completely fair.
It was in the initial press release when the game first got announced.
But also, like, for folks who don't know, like, I have been a notorious Final Fantasy VII hater for many years. Because I didn't get a chance to play it when it first dropped in '97, and then played a little bit of it when it dropped on Vita, and just hated it. It was like this is a lot of terrible stuff, and I don't know why people like this game. And I will say that the combat is fantastic. I think it's really well done. I think they made some really smart choices in that space. It is one of the best looking games that you will ever see come out of Square and on the PlayStation 4, or on whatever platforms it's on. But like, I don't care about any of the characters in this game, and it didn't make me care about any of the characters in this game. So if you want to hear the full version of me having a lot of things to say and kind of working it out with a buddy of mine, Cameron Hawkins, who writes for DualShockers, who is a huge fan. We kind of like went back and forth about like where I was feeling, and then how you kind of explained why I was feeling some of the ways that I was. So it's a really good show. I think everybody should check it out, and it'll drop on Tuesday. So check that out.
All right. I'm not a big enough fan of Final Fantasy games at all to sit there and speak to what should or shouldn't be remade. Most of the time, like, and I'm hoping this doesn't happen with the remake. I haven't really read enough about it to figure it out, but most of the time I'll play a Final Fantasy game. It'll look fun. My older brother played a lot of them that I can remember. And you get to the point where there's like 6 or 7 pages of reading about how to craft a spell, and I'm like, I'm out. So this one seems to be a little bit more on the surface action oriented in terms of how it's working. And like, that's fine, and that's the part that intrigues me a little bit more, because the combat's there, but the turn base isn't anymore, and that's, you know, like what initially drew me and surprised me in the demo as well. I didn't get a chance to play it. Michael was playing a lot of it and covered it during most of the E3 times. So that, you know, and I only half listened to him when he talks about what he saw. So,
same.
Yeah.
So you just got to say Destiny, and
Yep, it's all good. So, so like that part is intriguing me. I'm just, you know, worried that it's going to kind of fall into a little bit of the single player void that my games fall into. Something's cool is going to happen in Call of Duty or in Destiny or in Division. It's going to draw my attention away, and I'm going to start playing with my friends, and I'm going to forget about it. So, in terms of it being released episodic, in what it sounds like from a development standpoint of what we found out when we found out this game was being announced and when it came out, like, this probably is the only route that it could have. Yeah, like, if you want anything even remotely close to this, you're gonna have to take it in chunks.
I haven't played it yet. I'm picking it up this week for sure. But I like the idea of not just doing a kind of paint by numbers remake of a game that we've seen before, of just like, hey, here's a straight port, it's at a higher resolution. I like the retelling of the story aspect of it, you know, where they can tighten some of the story that definitely probably needed to be tightened. It's been a long time since I played the original one, but like, there's some things that they, you know, could fix now and then put in just a little bit extra because they're rebuilding it from scratch for the most part. So I like that aspect of it. I don't like the lack of telling people that this is part 1. That is really shitty, because I have plenty of friends that I don't have the heart to tell them that the game isn't going to end where they think it's going to end, and they have no idea. because I don't think anywhere on the box art, or if they bought it digitally, there's no box art for them to read. So, so yeah, you're shaking your head no. So like,
Yeah,
there's
but
like no
doesn't
mention.
it sounds like it has a beginning, a middle, and an end in terms of they've taken a segment of the game. Final Fantasy VII was 40 hours on the original, and they've taken a segment of the game that was initially 8 to 11 hours, I think people said
And made it 40
and they
hours.
made that in 40 hours, so they fleshed out the story, and it's all going to be kind of like how they connected to it. Now, yeah, what do you call Final Fantasy VII Remake point two? Like, is it like, I mean, I don't know how you brand this and market this. It'll be interesting to see what they do, and if it's, you know, like the fascinating part is going to be like, how are they going to entice someone to play part two that didn't play part one? So that's always the interesting part, because you always see about these other games that release expansions and there's like, here's this catch up mechanic. And not that I'm comparing Final Fantasy VII to like any kind of live service game, but when you release, you know, even Uncharted 2, like a lot of people started on Uncharted 2 and then they found out that Uncharted 1 existed, and it's a pretty good game, and if you want to have a better understanding of what's going to happen in 3, you should really play it, you know. And my concern is like, how do you connect the person that plays part two and then have them go back and play one? What is part 3 or whatever going to feel like? Like, that'll be interesting.
As a person who had never played the original one, and this is my first actual full playthrough of a Final Fantasy game, I have no real want to play whatever the new version is. Because they from the conversation, and again, like, we had a great conversation about this, was like, there are so many parts that got chunked out that, for me, from a narrative perspective, who wants things to make sense, it doesn't make sense.
Because I would assume that there is some kind of cliffhanger at the end of this, like,
kind of, but I can't say, because I don't want to ruin it for other people who haven't played. But I would say, like, it is not the full story, like people have said, and to a certain extent, like, I feel worse off for the folks who were expecting this to be the full game, because they kind of got cheated. And I was saying this on Twitter, that I was like, it sucks from a Square Enix perspective to ask people who are really excited for this game to come back for years to have to almost spend probably hundreds of dollars to get the full story in this way, because they chunked it out in some way that feels like a Marvel movie, where they just let you sit at the end of it and then, like, yeah, well, we know you have like 4 more movies coming down the pipe, so you just have to wait for those other movies to drop.
How do you feel about the people that are kind of comparing this to like the way that they did the movies for Hobbit?
I mean, I guess, I mean, it just feels unreasonable to ask people to spend that kind of dough for this story that is, each one of them, very much their own condensed and singular experiences that definitely do have through points to go to the main story and kind of the full arc of the characters and the story there. But like, how much money are you going to ask me to spend just to get the full story, when you could have given me that full story in the beginning?
But what if that
feels unfair?
But what if that full story is 160 hours for $60 or $70? Like, that game would have been crazy.
I would be okay with that, because that's Skyrim. You know what I mean? That's Skyrim to a certain extent, with Skyrim with more choice, with more ways to do things, in a more kind of broader scope of how you get to the end of that narrative. Of course, there's the main story and then there's the side stuff. But like, this is a game that everyone knows the ending to, and you still like held some of that stuff for arbitrary reasons that no one is from Square has really even explained in real ways, besides the thing that I can glean, which is like, you wanted more money because you know that the nostalgia will make people buy it. So
my favorite thing is going to happen is 4 years from now, when Remake 2 comes out, they're going to have to release a PS4 version of it, you know, and probably an Xbox One version once that exclusivity is done. Like, because then fans are going to be mad, because this is a system seller. There's probably people that will buy a PS4.
There's already reports of significant hardware movement because of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
So you're going to have people that are going to buy into this current hardware to play Final Fantasy VII, and then Square is going to have to decide in like 3 or 4 years, whenever the hell Part 2 comes out, if they're gonna put the money and resources into releasing it on that old platform, for like fans that would be mad, depending on how big of a system seller this ends up being for them. Which chances are they're just gonna be like, buy the new one, but it's gonna be weird.
Or they're gonna just wait, or people who are gonna be really excited will just wait 7 years.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. I'll buy the Game of the Year edition with everything on it.
Yeah, that makes more sense to be able to do that now at this point. If you've waited this long,
we'll get the true version of it, like the 4-disc version of it, like this.
Yeah, and it'll be 7,000 gigs. Yeah, and you won't be able to download the digital version
because you have a
data
cap.
Play with your grandkids
because you have a data cap.
Time. You're like, I can play this 180-hour game now.
Yep.
My wife was watching the stream a little bit, and she was asking some questions, and I was like, years and years ago, I did a Tales of Symphonia playthrough on the GameCube when we were, early 2004, 2005, 2006, and she kind of got hooked into the story, and, she was annoyed because she had to kind of like watch me play through the grind part of a JRPG to get to the story part. And I told her, I go, you better not pay too much attention to this, because if you get hooked into this, I'm not waiting until you're going to be home to play this game. Because she does that with a lot of like Naughty Dog games. She treats them as movies. Like, she has me play them, and she enjoys watching me play, and she helps figure out puzzles, but she enjoys just the cutscenes and the storytelling, and she can't play a video game to save her life. But
the second part of this question, are there any other Final Fantasy games would you want to see remade like this?
Yeah, and that's what I mentioned, that I'm just not a big enough Final Fantasy fan to know or to care.
Same.
See, I was going to say Final Fantasy 13, just because it's great story, good gameplay, but bad level design. So if they would give that another shot. And also Final Fantasy 13 was kind of the same thing, where it didn't need to be 3 games. They kind of stretched it into 3 games. If they can somehow condense that into 1 or 2 games, that would be fantastic.
Because there was they were about to say there was Final Fantasy 13-2 or whatever, right?
Yeah, 13-2, 13-3.
Yeah.
Which by the time they got to the third one, it was just like, you don't need to do this. Like, first one was fine on its own, but had level design issues that would have been nice if they would just, give it another shot, and then maybe just ignore that there was 2 other ones in a series. So kind of the opposite of Final Fantasy VII, where they're just like expanding everything. If they could just condense 13 into just like 1 game, that would be nice.
It just gave me heartburn thinking about all those damn dashes and all the fucking dumb shit.
Well, it's like the same
I'm
thing.
A Kingdom Hearts fan too,
let's say
so
Kingdom Hearts Remix version 1. All right, our last question comes from Andrew. When shelter in place is over and you can safely go out in the world again, what is the first thing that you want to do? Movie theaters, eat at a certain restaurant. So Kai, what do you got?
I think I want to hug people again. Like, want some just like serious, like, no, it doesn't even have to be special. It doesn't have to be some like long wistful look into a person's eyes.
He's gonna walk out of the house and hug the mailman.
Yeah, I'm just like, yo, UPS dude, come here, let me give you love, fam. Like, I love you, man. But it's probably definitely like food. Like, I miss restaurants for sure. Like, I want a good steak from a good restaurant that I've been to.
That doesn't come in a styrofoam box.
Yeah, I don't have to wipe it down with Lysol wipes before I eat it and move it into another container.
They don't have to leave it on your porch and then call you and be like, all right, the food's on your porch, and they run to the car.
It's like tag. It's like food tag. Just like, it's on your porch, go get it. And it's like but yeah, that's kind of it. It's like I miss the layers of human contact part, which I usually, as a super introvert, I don't really care about, but it's nice to be able to do that stuff.
I want to take Owen to the park because he doesn't understand why the parks are closed when they're right there. Yep. So, I mean, I want him to, like, a lot of times he wants to play outside, and, I live in Michigan, so on Easter it was like 75 degrees, and on Tuesday we almost could shovel our driveway. So, it's, and Michael's got some of the crazy weather that we've gotten as well. So we've had some, t-shirt and shorts days, and then like, okay, like I need to dig my winter coat back out again. So, I mean,
it snowed hard.
Yeah.
2 days ago.
Owen doesn't like understand, like, we try to tell him like, hey, you need to, if we're gonna go out, like you can't, he wants to like go to McDonald's and go to a place, and like he wants to do what 4-year-olds want to do, and trying to explain to him like, we don't want you to get sick, and he sees me wear a mask to work, and one day when I forgot the mask, and because my work has disposable masks as well, so I forgot my current mask, and he was like freaking out because I didn't have my mask, and for a 4-year-old to already thinking about that is just devastating to me, where he's like, Daddy doesn't have his mask, like we got to take it to him, it's just crazy.
Yeah, I'm having fun. So like, I don't want to go back to
people
movie
anyways.
Yeah, this is great. People are washing their hands more. I hate shaking hands, and I don't probably ever have to do that the rest of my life. I no longer have to give people I don't like awkward handshakes so they don't shake my hand again, which I've become notorious for doing that, where it's just like, oh, I'm going to just hold this handshake just a little too long, or I might let my finger linger as I pull my hand away, just so you're creeped out enough. You don't ask me to shake your hand again. Like,
this is why I never introduced Michael to Kai in person.
Oh, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be so good.
Oh man, just awkwardly shake up with someone just so you don't have to do it again.
Just shake hands and then do this little part right here.
Yeah, just real quick, and then you'll just know like exactly. Yeah, I don't want shaking hands. Like, I'm happy movie theaters are just like, or movie companies are just releasing for $20 their movie on demand, so I don't have to go to a theater. I love that.
That has been pretty good, actually.
Right?
Oh, you mentioned that. We did. My wife and I did watch the movie I Still Believe. So that was like, she's like, hey, it's like $15 or $18 for like 48 hours, and it came out in the theater like in March. I'm like, March what? She's like, I don't know, like the 17th. I go, oh, so like the day before everything stopped. So I mean, supporting them, like supporting a movie, and I, not to go off track, but I hope that maybe this shows movies that maybe they don't have to always go right to theater. There is a financial stand with using Amazon or using a digital foundation for you to just release your movie straight to there, because it seems like everybody's like, all right, they're just running away from 2020.
Yeah. But it's like, I guess the only thing that I can see what I miss is like when I would go with my friends to like Portillo's or something, and we would finish our food in 20 minutes, but we would then stay there for like another 2 hours and just shoot the shit, for a long time. I kind of miss doing that, because you can't even really like, I would have friends over to play Rock Band, and we would, do that, but it would be like 6 or 7 people. Can't really do that right now. You're kind of an asshole if you try and like organize that. So like, I kind of miss doing that. And there's also some restaurants that just are either closed or they're too far for me to take public transit to do a takeout order. So I guess some restaurants and some food places is what I want to go to. But other than that, I'm loving it. It's pretty damn great. I haven't been on the bus in so long. I'm saving money. So every day at work, I would have to eat Subway because I was like the only option at work. I haven't had Subway in so long. I am so happy. Like, I'm not eating yoga mat bread. It's fantastic.
It's totally yoga mat bread.
So like,
it's so yoga.
Michael doesn't. I know Michael doesn't have a car, but Kai might get this reference. A lot of like, I've seen it on social media. Like, who's getting 3 weeks to the gallon now?
Oh yeah, no doubt, right? Like gas prices are like $3 a barrel.
Dude, I got gas for like 86 cents like 10 days ago.
Jeez.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm having fun, guys. I don't know about you.
All right. For the most part, that is our show, our spotlight, which is the segment that we spend, highlighting something that's interesting either to myself or to Michael. The spotlight is Kahlief and his spot on me and what he's doing and what he's been doing for such a long time. So please, if you haven't checked out his show, go ahead and give that a listen. Follow him on Twitter. Follow him on Twitch. Download, subscribe to his podcast. He is an influence to myself and to Digital Days Gaming's foundation, and he is a a good friend of mine. He's somebody that I look forward to seeing when I get opportunities to see him, and we go out of our way when we know we're in when we're in proximity. We go out of our ways to just to see each other for a little bit. So we really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. It's something that we've been talking about prior to, like, even like on the other show that we were trying to get worked out, and it just never seemed to. And I'm like, you know what, let's see what he's got going on now, and it just seemed to work. So I appreciate you taking the time. So please just plug away again. So
gents, thank you again so much for having me on. This has been a blast, man. Like I get a chance to listen every week, but it's also like so
you
much
don't listen to this show every week.
I listen to the show. I listen to the show.
You know what? It's really hard to listen to podcasts right now. So
I check. I have been checking out the show to make sure that everything is on point and all that good stuff. And I will make sure to give you a very awkward handshake.
Okay.
In person.
2022 or whenever.
Yeah. Basically, with all the dumbasses in Florida, it's still going to the beach. Anyway, we're never going back outside again.
Nope.
It's gonna be 2020-2 the year. Yeah, check out my stuff at Kajakins is my handle on Twitter. At Spawn on Me is the show one. We do a show every Thursday 7 p.m. PST on Twitch, twitch.tv/Spawn on Me there. You can check out our work that we do with our charity events under the hashtag Spawn for Good. We're gonna hopefully be doing something before the year's end in relation to the election that's happening. So hopefully getting the vote out from all the folks who are hopefully going to be able to vote. Who knows how the hell that's going to work. But you can also, again, check out our
You want me to wait in line to touch a machine that somebody else touched? Like,
oh man, I mean, it's going to be so crazy. This year is just done. YouTube.com/Spawn on Me is where you can find most of our content. Usually the show goes out on the podcast platforms, and then a video version goes out on the YouTube channel as well. So yeah, like, please come and check out our show. I think what we do really, really well is showcase and kind of look at gaming through a prism of through my lens and through the lens of people of color. So if you're looking to kind of dig into what that may be, it's a fantastic show to check out and listen to. And again, the next episode is going to be all about Final Fantasy VII. So you'll have something definitely to listen to and get mad at me about. I give it a whole bunch of shit. So
give it to him. Give it to him on Twitter too, and he'll respond. So.
Oh yeah, please tweet at me and tell me all the terrible takes about my terrible takes, because I would love that actually.
So we will do our best to get all of those links in the show notes. I don't know if I have a cap or not. I don't think we do. So we'll get all your stuff in there. So it should, everything for Kahlief and for Swan on Me should be in the show notes below. So you guys can just click on those and show him the DDG love that he so greatly deserves. Michael, you got anything else?
No. This pretty chill right now. So got nothing new going on right now.
All right. We will talk to you guys next week. As always, all the social links are in the show notes, so hang out there, join the Facebook group, join the conversations, jump in Discord. I know a little bit of you guys got some extra time on your hands, so come hang out. And then again, we have the Patreon page, but like I've mentioned over the last couple of times, like, please do not feel obligated to support us. It's only if you are able to. There's the tip jar, there's the $3 access, which gets you a private channel in our Discord server, and Twitch subscribers get access to that as well. You just have to kind of let us know or link a lot of your stuff in Discord, and then it'll do a lot of it automatically for you. But I don't, no obligation to that. We've gotten some recent Patreon supporters, so thank you guys so much. But the $5 tier gets you 24-hour early access to the episodes. It'll be on 6 a.m. on Wednesdays. And then the $7 gets you the bonus content episodes, which we will definitely be recording because Michael has a lot more time on his hands. So,
yeah. I've been so bored in quarantine, I made my cat an Instagram page.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, that's how bored I am. So,
that's
yeah, I got time. I got time.
All right. Again, Kahlief, thank you for taking the time, hanging out with us. We appreciate it. So I hope everyone has a great night. Keep moving forward, and we'll talk to you next week.
See you.